Now, to some, it's a sign that American leadership in international deal-making is back. To some, it doesn't go far enough and must be extended to ensure multinational companies truly pay their share. And to others, it's rich countries carving up a deal that will damage smaller economies that compete on tax. The G7 agreement on a minimum global corporate tax rate of at least 15% arrived with great fanfare at the weekend. But is it all it's cracked up to be? Well, joining me now to discuss this, Morgan Schondelmeier from the Adam Smith Institute and George Dibb, head of the Centre for Economic Justice at the Institute for Public Policy Research. Get me teeth in. Morgan, let me start with you. Getting Google and Facebook and Amazon to pay more taxes, what's not to like about that?
The issue here isn't really about tax. It's about international jurisdiction over sovereign powers. This is about the UK having the ability to set their tax rates how they wish. What we're seeing here is the US using their considerable soft power to ensure that they don't lose out when they go to raise their corporation tax. So the US is really just exerting power over the entire global tax system so that they don't have to compete.
Well, you say that, but I mean, this is very much in keeping with what Britain, France and other countries in the world, particularly in Europe, have been trying to do, which is get some of these US tech giants to pay a fair share of taxes.
And that's right. And when the UK and France and other countries in the EU tried to do that, the US threatened them with sanctions. So we know that this isn't about paying tax. This is about the US trying to get their domestic policy underwritten by foreign countries.
George, what do you make of that?
Well, I think the argument that this globally agreed minimum corporation tax will harm UK sovereignty really is a false one. At the moment, the UK has no sovereign ability to tax these companies because they're able to offshore their profits to the Cayman Islands, to the British Virgin Islands, to Bermuda, and not pay any tax at all. So actually getting a global agreement that tackles the ability of companies to shift their profits overseas is an increase in our sovereignty. It's also totally false to say that a multilateral agreement on this is a backward step or some kind of cartel. We regularly make multinational agreements on trade deals to multilaterally remove tariffs. And this is pretty standard practice. It's a real step forward in terms of ensuring a fair tax system for companies around the world. And right now, if you're a small or medium company or a high street shop, you have to fight on an unfair playing field against these multinational companies who are able to move their taxes around in this way. And that's just really unfair. UK citizens and businesses will benefit from a fairer tax system.
OK, well, I mean, no one said life was fair, George. I mean, what's wrong with allowing countries like Ireland to set a very low tax rate if they want to? I mean, that's down to them. I mean, there is a point to what Morgan is saying here.
Well, companies benefit substantially from UK government investment, say in things like physical and digital infrastructure, skills and education. It's right that companies pay back their fair share. But it's also really unfair if companies aren't taxed on the same basis. And that's really what we're talking about here. Lots of companies aren't large enough or aren't based on a multinational basis, which allows them to engage in that. So it's about fairness between companies of different sizes. If you look at the polling on this, you know, citizens are rightly appalled that Amazon is able to pay a lower tax rate than one of their employees. It's just not fair at the moment.
Morgan.
The idea that these large multinational companies won't still have an advantage if we flatten the tax rate is false. They will still have the power, the money, the lawyers to get around whatever we throw at them. What we're doing here is creating higher barriers to entry for any competitors to come up the line. So what we really need to focus on here is the idea that foreign investment of companies into the UK is a benefit. You said that companies benefit from government investment. Well, we benefit from investment of corporations, jobs, growth. All of these things are benefits of corporations. Corporations aren't just these kind of ethereal, amalgamous entities. They are people, they are jobs, they are products as well.
Sure, but Morgan, I mean, if you look at Amazon's business in the UK, I mean, that business has been built very largely on the road infrastructure that's been paid for by generations of British taxpayers. I mean, it's scandalous, the lack of taxes that they've been paying over recent years when you look at their sales. They've clearly shifted their profits elsewhere.
Yes, so that is something that you can address, but this isn't some sort of dichotomy between people and corporations. We benefit from Amazon every day when we order from them. That's a choice that we're making. This isn't some sort of one-sided agreement here. We use these companies, and in the pandemic has shown us more than ever how much we rely on these corporations. And putting up barriers to entry for any sort of competition is just going to raise prices and make it harder for us to access these goods as consumers.
George, what do you make of that? That's a fair point. I mean, if you do raise taxes, you do raise entry barriers to an extent.
Well, I think what we really want, and what the Adam Smith Institute claims to be in favour of, is the fair reward for innovation, for risk-taking, for investment. And as long as companies within the UK are taxed on a very different basis, we're not getting that. Just to give an example of the size of offshoring we're talking about here, $1.5 trillion of revenues are moved around the world by companies every year. We project that the global minimum corporation tax will raise an additional £14.7 billion every year in the UK. And that's not from putting up taxes. It's only on companies who are already engaging in this kind of profit shifting. That's money that could be invested back into the NHS, that could be invested into vital services and recovery from the pandemic.
George, in coming years, the UK government is going to be extracting in taxes the highest proportion of GDP since the early 1960s. Shouldn't the government be looking at spending the money it has more carefully rather than seeking to raise taxes elsewhere?
Well, the UK will still have the lowest headline rate of corporation tax within the G7. We still remain incredibly competitive on taxation. What yesterday's agreement will actually mean, though, is we will be ending the race to the bottom on corporation tax and instead kickstarting a race to the top on wider things, which mean that companies want to invest in the UK. Those are the kind of things that also tend to benefit citizens too. The UK will have to ensure that it's an attractive destination for investment. That means investing in physical infrastructure, roads, rail, broadband, skills and education training for the citizens, and making sure that we have thriving towns and cities around the UK. Those are all things that companies want to see when they decide where to invest and where to base their business. And it's what people want to see as well in the UK. As long as company...
OK, George, we've got to leave it there. George Morgan, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.